I can't wait to read the hate comments.
How can anyone hate you?
Guy sucks.
How can anyone hate you?
Oh, man.
What's up? Jake Reed here. I was so lucky and thankful to have my friend Victor Indrizzo come over. He's been on the session scene here in LA for a long time. He's played on so many albums and movies. It's hard to list all of them. And now I will list a lot of them from his Wikipedia page. Scott Weiland, Chris Cornell, Beck, Queens of the Stone Age, Lizzo, which won a Grammy for Record of the Year. Pretty awesome. Did I say Willie Nelson already? Macy Gray, Colby Calais, Seal, Tegan and Sarah, Paul Stanley, Rufus Wainwright, Brad Meldau, Liz Phair, Five for Fighting, Shakira, Emmylou Harris, Sarah Bareilles, Sheryl Crow, Mariah Carey, Debbie Gibson, OK Go. I'm still just reading off of here. Daniel Lanois, Avril Lavigne, Gwen Stefani, Gnarls Barkley. Since 2007, he's been touring with Alanis Morissette. Some of the movies I'll just list off. 40-Year-Old Virgin, Get Him to the Greek, Horrible Bosses, Crazy Stupid Love, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Get Well Soon, Spider-Man, Charlie's Angels, Superbad, and The Matrix Reloaded. Oh yeah, and we both just split the drum chair on the new Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown. So that's fun too.
Anybody that knows me knows I hate this.
I feel honored.
It is only because I love you.
Oh, I love you too. Victor Indrizzo.
Here I am. There you are.
We've been trying to do a video together for well over a year.
Well over. I'm scared.
I'm
I
scared
admire
too.
your videos. I really like your videos. And that's saying something. There's not a lot of drummers I like watching, but I love watching you.
I appreciate that.
And I'm sure I told you that pretty early on, maybe even before we actually met.
I'm trying to think of when I actually met you.
I'm not sure, but I do remember watching your videos and reaching out to you and writing and saying how cool I thought your stuff was.
So one time I was at Oreshnik's warehouse with Peter. I think Peter said, "Hey, John, who's the guy in town right now? Like, who's doing the most session work?" He's like, "Well, Victor, he works a lot." And I was like, "Victor, I gotta meet this guy.
Like, who the hell is that?"
This guy? And like, I would get on the internet and look for anything I could find about you. And it was kind of before, not that I'm that old, but it was before you could just find you anywhere. So there wasn't that much to find out until like I started working with when I started playing a lot with Sean Hurley. Yeah. And he would talk about you all the time because you guys, you're like,
we did a lot of records together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys have a special groove together too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I started to learn more about you.
What'd you learn? Just
how awesome you are. And then I remember one day I was looking at the credits for Largo, the Brad Meldau album. Yeah. Holy crap, Victor's on here? What? He's playing with Jim Keltner?
And Matt Chamberlain. 3 drummers at the same time. So, I happened my way into that by chance, really. I was friends with Brad. And he was like, "Hey, you should come down. We're recording." And I went down, and they're like, "Oh, you should play."
You're just friends with Brad Meldau. Wow. Yeah. For those of you guys that don't know about Victor Indrizzo, look him up.
You probably won't find him. I keep a pretty low profile.
No, but just stuff you've played on. You've played on some hits.
Here and there.
Some bona fide hits. Does that happen to you? Like, you're out like at the grocery store or like at the coffee shop and you're like, "Oh yeah, I played on this."
We used to call it mall music. Like, go in the mall and you would hear your song or you hear yourself on there.
Which one do you think you hear the most?
Through the years, it's kind of different. I would hear the Avril Lavigne, like Complicated or Skater Boy for a while, and then it kind of went away, and now it's kind of coming back. It was the Colby Calais, Bubbly. I would hear that a lot. And then now, more recently, like Lizzo stuff, hear that.
The Lizzo stuff is just so funky.
It's pretty fun.
And that's all you.
That's all me.
I remember one time I was talking to you and you said something about they would send you program stuff to play like right along with, and then you just be overdubbing stuff on top of stuff.
Yeah.
Parts on top of parts.
There's a couple different things. Like during the pandemic, I was doing stuff at home, but initially I think the first track I played on was Juice, and we went to a studio to do that, and they had programming kind of laid out, like they had mapped out what they wanted to do. But the fun thing, like working with Ricky Reed, like he just let me go crazy with percussion. We did, the toms were overdubbed, so we had like, a big rack of concert toms. We do timbales. He loves percussion and like kind of that Michael Jackson era of percussion, so we do a lot of that. So it's pretty fun. Like, then they just kind of weed through it and see what they keep and what they get rid of,
'Cause that brings up an interesting thing. for drummers out there watching and producers, learning how to do that, learning how to record with something that's already programmed, that's not listening back to you. Was that something that was easy for you? I remember talking to you a long time ago about, at one point you started getting called a lot to record. I remember you describing it like you could sound like a guy who was in the band, but also you could play with a click. And usually the guys in the band couldn't play with a click. And so they call you to sound like the guy in the band because you could play with a click. So, and that's sort of similar to playing along with a programmed drum part that's maybe not listening back to you.
In the 90s, when people started using program stuff, a lot of the times it was not perfect, right? Or like the loop would be a little funny or the feel of it. So you'd have to listen to it and try to figure out where how much is it swung, how much is it not, like all these kind of variations. And really, I toured with Beck for a couple years. And Midnight Vultures, and that was my music schooling. Like, I'm not a schooled guy, but that was my schooling, like, because we were playing live and there were literally just layers of all these, like, grooves going on, then trying to figure out, how do I fit in here, play along with this and not be flamming, right? And like, what is it, what am I letting the programming doing? What am I doing? And where does it land in relation to the click and all of those things? So early on, the programming could be really funny or weird, and you just have to kind of sit there and learn where it's like, oh, that kick is weird, it feels weird, or it's not quite in time. It was tough.
Yeah, he's a genius.
He's a genius.
Does he hear, like, when you guys would be playing together, does he hear all of that? Like,
all of it.
Would he give you feedback on what he thought you should be doing?
Yeah, because, when I was younger and not being a schooled guy, to me, things were either swung or they're not. Like, I didn't realize the various degrees of swinging something. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, like, swing that 15% less. And initially I was like, what do you mean swing it 15% less? I was like, and then I would listen and go, oh, yeah, okay, this top part's kind of straight, but maybe down here is swinging, or like, figuring out how to marry them, or like, dial the swing back this much. And it was an education.
Would you go back and like practice that on your own, or would you just kind of figure it out?
It was kind of figure it out on the spot.
Job, on the job training.
Yeah, because like it would be in rehearsal and rehearsal stops, and it's like, oh, you need to do this. And it's like, oh, I need to figure this out now. Like, and play it. So that was a great learning experience. And I have to say, all the guys in his band at that time that I got to play with, like Justin Meldal Johnson, Roger Manning, Lyle Workman, like being with those guys, there was like such a high bar, and you really wanted to rise to the occasion. We worked really hard. Like, we would rehearse a lot.
Can we jump into some playing?
Yeah.
Speaking of grooves and grooving, you know how it is in town, like you're just hanging out with different producers or engineers. For me, I'm always trying to learn about the drummers I really love, and I'm like, what's it like with Victor? How does he play with the click?
Yeah.
Where does he put things?
That's a fun thing. There's been a couple times I got to do like percussion on a record that like Matt was playing drums on, Matt Chamberlain, and I was like, oh man, the coolest part about this is not playing, tambourine or whatever on the record. It's like I get to hear how Matt feels things, or like how he plays against the click, and that's
in my brain. Like growing up, I'm like, all those guys are perfect. Yeah. They play perfect. They're not human.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not true. I mean, nobody's
the thing
human.
To me that disappoints me in modern music, and maybe because I'm old, is that everything after it's gridded and everything's lined up perfect, some of the soul is missing from that, right? Like people are not perfect. We're not perfect. It's like how we feel things.
Yeah.
And when I listen to music, I want to feel something, and I feel it through the imperfections, just how it feels against something or on the click, or how things, I did learn early on that, from reading in magazines, all the great drummers would talk about, you can play the verse kind of on the click or a little back, the pre-chorus, you want to move a little slightly either right on it, and then, make it feel like it's leaning forward at the chorus, and then like trying to figure all that stuff out.
Do you find that you can still sort of do that with modern production?
It's trickier.
They just want you to play right with the
click
it's
all the tricky.
Time.
It depends on who you're working for. And then also that's the thing I think about. If you're a session guy and you're going to play on records, it's figuring out what guy you are that day. You know, am I the rock guy? Am I the, you know, singer-songwriter playing quiet guy? Am I like jazzy guy? Like, who am I that day? And that's the fun of it, is like each day you can be somebody totally different. Am I going to go in there and hit really hard? Am I going to hit really soft? Like,
Yeah, that is fun. That's why I like doing it.
me too.
You never have to be the same guy
Yeah.
one day in a row.
Yeah.
Could I oblige you to play with a click of your
Yeah.
choosing, like
Yeah.
whatever tempo? And because I think it's important for younger drummers, even older drummers, it can be a mystical thing of like,
Yeah.
how do you do that, or where should you play in relation to it? And of course, like you just said, it all depends on the music.
Depends on the song, and for me, it depends on the day. It's like
Exactly.
it really was ingrained in me, and I remember the very first record I was going to make was back in 1989, and I was in a band, and I was super scared because the story was, you know, if you were in a band and you worked with a big producer, chances are you're going to be replaced. There's some studio guy's going to come in and replace you if you can't play with a click. So I was so scared of that I would sleep with a metronome. I would just put it on, go to bed with it. Like, I was like, I am playing on this record. I don't want anybody else to play on it. And I think I got to play on it. I guess I'll never really know.
Yeah.
But there are some days I'll go and I'll record and I'm not thinking about the click at all. It's just there. It's this thing. And then other days, depending on my mental state or whatever, if I've eaten that morning, like then it, you know, could feel like a little bit, if I'm thinking about it, I'm usually like, it's a tougher day, you know. It's never that I can't do it, but you know what I'm saying?
So you're
like,
saying even after all these years of experience.
Yeah, you can just have a funny day with it, you know, or just be like, oh man, why am I on top? Or like, you know. But generally, if I find myself even thinking about it, that's where the trouble is. For me, it just has to be kind of a thing where I'm not thinking. Players are different, right? Some guys are great at thinking about what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not that guy. It's always got to be from the heart and about the emotion of something, as opposed to like, you know.
I actually think about that with your feel. There's so much stank to it. It's so greasy and funky. It just has like a very unique feel to it. You can go like, oh yeah, it sounds like Victor.
Right.
Just the way that you play things, your touch, where you place the beat. Yeah, I'd love to put on a click real quick.
Just Cowbell 1 is my favorite.
Really?
Yeah, just because I'm deaf.
You know, when I did the video at JR, he likes the MPC click.
That's wild.
Everyone's got their own.
What do you use?
I usually just use a Yuri click.
Right.
But that's interesting. Cowbell 1. Dang, that is so funky. It sounds awesome.
I mean, I think probably my general inclination is like to kind of lay back a little bit behind it, generally.
How are you actually feeling the beat? Are you subdividing? Are you just singing something in your head? How do you conceptualize? Are you just playing?
I just don't think about it.
Yeah.
It just kind of just has to hit me whatever kind of mood I'm in. And I think that's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. Is the feeling about something, right? It's one thing, you know, we have to learn to play drums. You want to execute, you want to be able to hit consistently, right, between your foot and your hands. But then about the emotion of something, right? And then putting yourself in the mood of a song so that you can convey that emotion, because that's going to dictate to me what I play, how much I play, how little I play.
Yeah.
If I'm playing a sad song, I have to be in that mood, and like, you know, I'm probably not going to play a lot of stuff. I'm not going to say a lot.
Right.
You know? Or if it's an angsty song, then maybe I'm going to have more to say, or I'm going to approach it that way. We talk a lot about technically how to play, but I think the emotion to me is the most important thing. Do you think that way when you play?
I think it depends. Sometimes I'm just trying to listen to the lyrics, and if it's like a singer-songwriter thing, that's all I'm focusing on. And I do feel like sometimes I end up thinking about it more if it's sort of like a character that you're trying to play,
Right.
where someone says, hey, can you play like this kind of thing, that maybe does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like that it gets that way with like film stuff.
Yeah. Film stuff's a whole other...
Yeah.
That's a whole other ballgame, because then you're trying to read what's written, decipher that, right?
Right. Or they're like, okay, in this scene, the whatever so-and-so is going to walk in the room and then this thing's going to happen. And you're like, okay. In a way, you're like trying to react.
Yeah.
But you're also trying to play something that maybe is kind of scripted. I love that.
Yeah. It's interesting playing somebody else's pedal, too.
Oh, yeah. Does it feel weird?
No, it feels great, but different. This
Yeah.
bass drum sounds amazing.
Oh, thanks. Just one of those new GreTsch broadcasters.
GreTsch is the best.
You're a GreTsch guy, right?
I am a GreTsch guy
Yeah.
forever.
Have you always played GreTsch drums, or?
No, I couldn't afford them early on. I just always had hodgepodge stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the first kits I think that were given to me were Orange County Percussion, which were great. But recording, I always used GreTsch. And it's funny, like when I first started doing sessions, I didn't even have a kit that I would bring to sessions. I always used whoever, I'm with John now forever. But before that was like Drum Paradise. And I think the first time I got to use a GreTsch was I got to use one of Kurt Biscayer's. We're like, hey, we have Kurt's old GreTsch kit. You want to try this? And I played it, and I was just like, holy shit, this is all I ever want to use. Like,
Yeah.
they're great in every scenario, right? And you've played the kit that I use. The one I primarily use is really John's kit.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's good for everything. Every
Yeah.
scenario you could put it in.
It's an 80s GreTsch, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
And it has standard tom sizes. It's not power toms.
Yeah.
But the bass drum is like a 22 by 18.
It's wild, yeah.
It's very deep, but
Yeah.
it sounds massive.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing I remember about that drum set, and maybe it's still the same. We were talking about this earlier about muffling drums, and you just never change the heads or anything.
Yeah.
But I remember that drum set has a lot of tape on it.
Yeah.
Like all over the toms, and then the bass drum's like, I don't remember how it was muffled.
I think it's got an old my kid's SpongeBob blanket in there still.
It sounds amazing. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like
we
you hear it
just-
and you're like, whoa.
Yeah,
Like,
we kind of leave it wherever the last thing is, and then just see, because you never know. On any day, maybe I peel a bunch of the tape off or put more tape on or whatever.
you get a lot of, you work with the producer and they're like, hey, can you tune the snare up or down? Or
It'll depend. I mean, I think over the years I've gotten pretty good at like hearing a song and then knowing. I go in, I go, okay, I know what this needs, but early on, and then even there was an interesting thing, kind of, what year would it have been? Maybe early 2000s, where you are starting to get into the more dead drums again.
Mm-hmm.
And I always was a big fan of kind of dead drums, and you'd run into some engineers that'd just be like pissed. They don't want it. Like,
Yeah.
Hey, what take that off there? Like, And the interesting thing now is like when I go to Nashville and I'll play like on a country record, generally the drums are pretty wide open. And I'm so used to playing them dead now that it like takes a second of like, oh, okay. It like they feel different, right?
Yeah.
Drums feel different
Right.
with nothing on them, or the heads react differently. And so getting used to that, I just wrap my head around playing, luckily getting sounds, go, oh, okay, I got it. Okay. At this point, I'm sure it's like that for you. You could hear a song and you go, oh, I think it should be this. And 9 times out of 10, it will align with what the producer has in mind. Or
Totally.
you
Yeah,
know.
it's rare when it's like, actually, I'm feeling something completely different than that.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time you hear it back, the Lizzo stuff or whatever, and you're like, wow, I don't remember playing that? Or it sounds so completely different than how you remember
Well,
it?
I mean, with a lot of pop music like that, there's going to be samples laid in there with it. So it's like, I don't, you know, years ago, I stopped thinking too much about all of that. Honestly, I think, you know, there's a certain thing living in Los Angeles, and if you play on a lot of records, you kind of have to develop like this. I don't want thick skin's not the right thing, but also like I learned to let things go. Like I'm gonna go, I'm gonna play, I'm gonna do my best, and if they want to grit it all, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. If
Let
they
'em.
want to leave it, great. It's not that I don't care, but it's like that thing. I don't want to get too caught up. There's too many things, too many times
Right.
that you drive yourself batty.
You sort of just don't take it personally
I
at
don't
all.
take it personally. Yeah. And I just, whatever their vision is, my job is to be of service.
Right.
Show up, you know, help you achieve what you're looking for, and then it's out of my hands.
Yeah.
You know? Because there are some records too, you go, oh, man, you might have worked really hard on getting the sound, and then all of a sudden you're like, that's not the snare sound we got, or,
Right.
you know. And so, yeah, what are you going to do? Like, you got to let it go.
Yeah.
You know.
Earlier, before we started filming, you were talking about back in the day with, you know, you'd hear like you on the chorus, or like, what were we talking about? You and Matt
Yeah, there was
Chamberlain
a
and, like,
time-
Josh Freese.
You know, early 2000s where there were so many records being made in Los Angeles, and the budgets were ridiculous. And, you know, I'd get a call to play, and as I'm walking out, Josh Freese is walking in, or Joey Warnaker, or Abe, or like all these guys. They would try everybody. And there were some tracks where, you know, I'd ask the producer afterwards, like, who made it on the track? And they'd be like, oh, well, it's you on this part, and it's Josh on this part. And they would just make this amalgam of things, and it was just a different era, you know. And I also learned, yeah, that I didn't have to be right for everything, and if somebody else ended up on a track, I wasn't gonna lose sleep over it. Like, you have to just let it go. That's part of the session guy's life. Like,
Right.
I
Totally.
might be great on one track, and maybe I'm not right, or what, you know, for another track, and it's all good. Like, as
Yeah.
long as the check clears, it's all good.
Yeah. So now I'm curious, can you think of any songs off the top of your head?
One of those, I think, I can't remember, but there was, and it's something, I think maybe it was an OK Go track or a Sky Sweetnam. I can't remember.
Hey, Victor,
Hey, Jake.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Because we've talked about this before. Who are some of your other influences?
I mean, early on, well, Ringo. I love Ringo. Like, he is
Big time.
He's so underrated, and anybody that, you know, says, oh, Ringo sucks or whatever, try playing one of those shuffles that he does
Totally.
for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You tell me Ringo sucks. Like, he's amazing and so musical. And I love Stevie Wonder's drumming, because it's very unique and very of the song, because he knows the song better than somebody would sit down and play. And so it's like the rules get broken of, like, you know, I'm playing just the hi-hat during the verse. It's like, no, I'll play hi-hat for a minute, but then I'm on the ride and then I come back, or like, you know, it's just so musical. And I loved James Gatson, right? Like,
Totally.
like just
Love
so
him.
beautiful and so groovy. Like, those were the guys that I really loved. And Steve Gadd. Steve Gadd is like one of the greatest in my mind, because he has this amazing facility, yet he knows when to use it and when not to use it, right? And that's, I think, what makes him so special.
What would be like something that you took from them to make your own thing? Like Gadd, for instance.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's funny, because when I was a kid and I would play the songs, I didn't learn the drum parts necessarily. Like, I wouldn't try and dissect what they were doing and try to figure it out exactly. I would just play along to the vocal, or like how I heard stuff. And probably because, you know, not being schooled, I couldn't figure out exactly what the hell he was doing. Like, what the is that? Like, you know, like... So it was just playing, and even the Beatles stuff, it's funny, I listened to it. Of course, there are some things you just kind of know, or you listen and you go, whoa, I was playing that completely wrong. Like,
Yeah.
but I would take just like, again, like a general feeling of how they did it. Like, the thing that's beautiful about Ringo is a lot of his fills, and especially later on where he's playing over the bar,
Mm-hmm.
and the way he swings things and how he reacts and how he just lays out sometimes. right? There's just like huge space. Like it's just musical.
Obviously, you have facility and chops, and
some not.
But, like,
You'd be surprised. Like there's a lot of things I can't do.
well, same with me. I
Yeah.
mean, all of us have holes, but
I think things just unlock as you're playing, right? The
Yeah.
more you're playing, you're like, because for years I couldn't even do like, double bounces. I didn't know how to do like a roll or like the right way. And then all of a sudden like, oh, wait, I always loved doing ghost notes. So I had it in one hand, but not really the other hand. And then all of a sudden you go, one day it kind of unlocks.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, wait, there's that.
Did you spend a lot of time, would you say, like growing up, mostly playing with records, or were you playing by yourself? Or
Mostly playing with records and then playing with other people. I always wanted to play with other people. Like it's funny, even now it's hard for me to sit and play drums by myself.
Right.
Like I'll do it for about 5 minutes. Like I'm so bored of myself. I can't do this. To me, it's always been about that interaction with people and that thing. And I think that's the other key, right? Is music has to be a conversation. Right? If I'm thinking about what I'm going to say to you and not listening to what you're saying,
Right.
we're not having a conversation.
Right.
Right. Sometimes guys will come to me and we'll talk and it's like, put yourself low in the mix. Like when I record, like the drums are barely there.
Right.
Like I don't want to hear myself. I know what I can do. I know what I'm going to do. I want to hear and react to what other people are doing. And if I'm hearing myself so much, it's like, that's what I'm going to, you're just going to pay attention to that. And say,
Right.
That's not it. Not for me.
Do you find nowadays that you're still getting to track live with rhythm sections or bands?
In Nashville, yes. And here every now and then, but the majority of work I do here now seems like it's by myself.
Like, I feel like I'm alone a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, which is sad,
Which
right?
is
Because
sad.
there's a different energy. There's times I love it where
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, I know it's very clear what I need to do. And when you get in a room with people, it's going to be different because, oh, wait, I feel this way with this bass player or this guitar player is playing here. So like you make adjustments.
Yeah.
And then it becomes this whole thing. It has a life of its own. Whereas somebody sends you a track, it's like, you know exactly what to do because it's scripted out for you.
It's totally scripted,
Yeah.
and they're not listening to you.
And they're not listening.
How often are you going to Nashville?
It depends, like quite a bit. I was just there 2 weeks in a row. I'll go back and forth, and there's a couple guys out there that will hire me, which is crazy in and of itself because there are so many great guys there. But as you know, like we make relationships with producers or engineers, and that just becomes a thing. Maybe they get superstitious, or they're like, oh, I had something good with this guy, so I need this guy every time,
Yeah, that's cool. Speaking of Nashville, and you had mentioned you love the Willie Nelson record
Yeah.
you played on. I remember listening to that. I need to go back and listen to it again.
It's a trippy record because there's only bass, I think, on 2 songs. The rest is there's no bass, which was very naked way to track something. And a matter of fact, I think the songs that even have bass were done after the fact. Daniel Lanois plays bass after.
When you were doing that and you're double drumming, like, well, we're kind of sitting here 2 drum sets. What's your concept for like double drumming with someone else? Are you just kind of listening and trying to play what they're not playing? Or
Yeah, I think again, like, the times that works is when you have 2 people that are going to listen to each other and be thoughtful and want to have a conversation. And I've done it sometimes where that wasn't the case, and you're like, wow, this is terrible,
Yeah.
But I got to do something with my buddy Chris McHugh, who is an amazing Nashville drummer, one of the best.
He's awesome.
And it was great because, like, you're going to listen and you can figure out, maybe it's like, oh, yeah, you take the lead on this one and I'm going to play around you, or vice versa. You can have a conversation with that. But what was cool about the Willie record is I don't recall us ever even really having a conversation.
That's what I was going to ask is because sometimes you have to kind of talk about it, but sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you don't, which is kind of even cooler when you just like let it flow and one guy, it just naturally kind of takes the lead, or like, you can play around with each other. And
when you guys did that record, was it pretty loose? You would just do a few takes and be done with it? Or
it was super scary because it was 1998. I'm like 30 or something. And, I'd only done a handful of things at that point. And here I am in the room with Daniel Lenoir, Emmylou Harris, Willie Nelson. And the only direction Daniel said to us, he's like, don't play anything typical.
Wow.
And Willie would play the song down once, and then we would do like 2 or 3 takes. And that was that. And no click, no nothing, just like go. And so you don't want to be the guy that's going to screw that up,
But don't play anything typical.
Yeah, and then there's that,
So
right?
Then you're thinking
like,
about that.
What is typical? And we were kind of lucky that we found our thing of like, we're like, well, 2 drummers, maybe it's going to be kind of drumliney, like New Orleans, kind of Latin. So we kind of took it in that direction. And Willie called us the Cubanos, like, so
Wow.
It had that kind of feel to it. And that made it easy to play around with, like.
And you were playing some percussion stuff too, or
No
was it
percussion.
Was it just all?
It was all.
drum
I
stuff?
think there was an ashtray because I was a smoker at the time. So we sat up right next to each other, and there was this cool, weird metal ashtray, and I would play the ashtray as like a percussion kind of thing, or like,
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Not the smoking part. I'm glad.
Well,
I'm glad you don't smoke anymore.
Yeah, don't smoke.
Smoking's bad.
Smoking's bad.
I was just curious, because it's not like there's like a ton of modern drummer articles about you. You can just go find about your influences and coming up, and plus it's just fun to hear you tell the stories.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I've been very lucky. There's a certain amount of luck, a certain amount of right place, right time. And then, being lucky enough that I've always kind of flown under the radar. I'm a pretty low-key, introverted person that I never got labeled as like the rock guy or this guy or that guy because nobody really knew who the hell I was. So it was kind of cool. I could wear a lot of different hats, which was, to me, a dream come true, instead of being like stuck in one genre of thing. And honestly, I never thought I was going to be a session guy or could be a session guy. I wanted to be in a band, and those bands just never worked out. But what was cool is I learned something from each of those bands, how to have different gears, right? If you're in a rock band, you have one gear. Punk rock band, there's another gear.
Totally.
Pop band, there's another gear, like all the different things. So it was cool kind of training ground for.
And now I see videos of you with Alanis.
Yeah, that's really fun.
You're like rocking out, man.
That's pretty rock.
It's a full-on show. I mean, you're going nuts.
It's really fun. Got my big concert tom kit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I love playing with her and those guys.
And you said you've been doing that since 2007 or something?
Yeah. It's a long time.
That's almost 20 years.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
That seems like it's a fun gig to do.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And yeah, she's just a wonderful person. And that was a cool gig that I got because I was doing a lot of sessions with Dave Levita at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And Blair Cinta, who is an amazing drummer, was doing it before me but wanted to stay home. And I was ready to like do something different and lucked into that. And it's cool. Like she's very cool about you just expressing yourself, I think when you take a gig with a well-known artist, you have to know what things to respect, right? There are going to be fills or signature things that you should play, right? Like people are going to be waiting for this fill or something. So you honor that, but the rest of the time it's really like we've got to make it our own, which is pretty fun.
Was that like also a discussion, or did you just kind of
No,
knew going
unspoken.
in?
And I had done enough tours and played with artists, that you're like, yeah, you gotta honor. That's why if you're going to a concert, you're going to, hear what you heard on the record to a degree, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we play something together?
Yeah.
Great. It's a little. Great. Perfect. Thank you for coming over. I should have said it in the mic.
I can't wait to read the hate comments.
How can anyone hate
Guy
you?
sucks.
How can anyone hate you?
Oh man, this probably stopped me from posting things years ago. I think did some TV show, and I had a bunch of tape on my toms, and some guy why you gotta put so much tape on your toms?
They don't know. They don't know. They're not you.
Or you can not put tape on your toms.
You can not put
I
tape
can
on
put tape on
yeah.
my toms. Can't we all just love toms?
Can't we all just get along? The thing, it's just like for me, it's all just sounds.
Yeah,
There's not a certain way that a drum is supposed to sound.
exactly. I agree, 100%.
Drives me insane. And on that note, thanks, Victor.
Yeah, thank you.